There isn't anyone who comes into this life have some degree of a pain body, one that either comes in through the birth process or is generational. It's inherited from the generations that went before. It can accumulate more in the early days of childhood. It's a unexpressed emotional pain that lives in the body, often in the cells of the body, and hasn't had an opportunity to discharge, to dissolve, to express itself, to be released. And these are often negative emotions, but they can also be positive emotions, which is something we don't often hear about. Like, for instance, the ability to express joy or celebration, to rejoice. So that would be the positive side of the pain body. But really what it is the pain body is an identification with emotional content. And then it's held on as an identity, and it has a sense of self. So it's kind of a masking. And it has it has primarily two different stages to it. One where there's absolutely no recognition of it. You can go through time feeling happy and at peace and lots of joy until it comes into a situation where there's a lot of stress or challenge, or somehow it's triggered. It's activated and it can start to act out, and it wants to be fed. But once you awaken, or your eyes open, and you can begin to sense and see people, see past, the kind of facade or persona or role playing that people carry, either to pretend to be a very happy person or pleasing or anything else, that you can see that behind that there's almost an energy like a dark kind of volcano that could erupt at any time. So that's really how it lives in us. And it's encouraged to live for many reasons. One that I spoke about last week is that we're a culture, all of our cultures are not encouraged or accustomed to deal with pain, or even to be allowed to express the negative emotions. For instance, for children, it's very difficult because it's really not natural to us to be exposed to violence. And if a young child is exposed to, say, a parental argument or conflict, or even to see something on the media, which is full of conflict, if you look at the news, and what they will immediately try to do is to move away from it, try not to feel it. So as a culture, we learn how not to feel. And in order for the child to be able to feel, they often need to be in the environment of a conscious adult who can support them and encourage them and give them a container of safety in which to feel. And then when this happens for any of us in early childhood, where you're actually encouraged and given the space to feel, pain body doesn't have to accumulate more pain, more emotional pain. Now, maybe less these days, but there was a time period where, the old expression, to be seen and not heard, kind of the zipping up around feelings. But I think less and less these days, there's more conscious parenting, and children learn to be able to be with their feelings. More often than not, that isn't the case. And what happens is the adult, in the process of going from childhood to adulthood, there's a lot of emotional pain that gets collected and gets fueled by the stories in the head. So whatever thoughts are being believed, whatever story we're telling ourselves, it's those thoughts that feed this energetic field I'm referring to right now as the pain body. And it actually has its own biological existence where it's infused in the cells and the cellular memory of the body. And it actually wants to continue to exist. Anything that comes into existence wants to continue to exist. So even if it's resting dormant, it will have a periodic time where it needs to feed itself. And it likes to feed on energy that is running at the same frequency. So it will seek out that same kind of energetic field, that same frequency. And this can exhibit itself in many different ways: sadness, anger, the drama that we see in relationships. That can be shame, poor me stories, being a victim. All of these, because the original content of the emotional and mental dimension of the pain body is that what's kind of keeping it in place, what's its anchor, what solidifies it, is an early assumption that gets made. And you can call this ego. It gets made as an identity, and the assumption becomes a core belief, and it often has to do with I'm not enough. Somehow I did something wrong. There's never enough. There's not enough abundance. There's not enough whatever to go around. I don't deserve. All of these kinds of core beliefs that sit beneath the surface of this energetic field. So that gives just a little bit of a context in which to view the pain body. And now what we want to get at is how to dissolve it, which doesn't have to be a huge task and is very, very possible. And also to say that the pain body has a role in the evolution of consciousness. And what I mean by that is that it's not a mistake. And this is a very important perspective to have on pretty much anything, that nothing is a mistake, and it isn't a problem necessarily, because the fact that the pain body is a dimension of suffering that not only happens for individuals, but also in our collective. And it's getting fed all the time. You can just see that in the news, just what's happening right now in this very moment. The collective pain body is being fed. But also, like, the positive element of that, you could say, is that humans are not designed to suffer. Like, consciousness is meant to evolve. Human beings are meant to evolve. And if we're not in alignment with the process of evolution, which is harmony, peace, joy, consciousness, universal connection, if we're not in harmony with that, there's going to be a sense of discord that at a certain point becomes unbearable. Like, suffering reaches its height, and then the individual consciousness, it's almost like it does a turnaround upon itself and says, this is enough. I'm done. And that's its role in the evolution of the totality of consciousness, for it to wake up to itself. This is why we often hear, too, that you can't take away another person's suffering. That suffering does serve a role in a sense. It has a purpose, which is difficult to see because who wants to see suffering? But what it does, it ignites our inner flame, our fire, the fire of awakening, where the heart cracks open and it says, this is enough. And it collapses in upon itself. And it's that cracking open, it's that collapse, which allows, I think I called it in the Rumi poem, or Rumi called it the temple of the heart, to become ablazed with a potent force, the force of awakening. And that force of awakening isn't limited to the heart. It also descends down into the base of the body, which gives us an anchor here in this earth and a stability that can't come any other way. And the reason why this is important is, how do I say this? It's so easy to put a Band-Aid on emotion, to put a Band-Aid on any time that the heart cracks open, any time that an authentic, genuine feeling is felt. It's very easy. We're accustomed to trying to figure something out in the head about it, or coming up with some way of fixing it. And we have all kinds of Better Me programs and Fix It programs, or to take something that feels uncomfortable. It's very important to be able to allow yourself to be with discomfort, where, pain deserves to be felt, to be able to be with discomfort, because if there's something that is identified as wrong, bad, shouldn't be happening, then the trick that the mind plays is that we can put a positive spin on it. We can somehow make it right, make it good, convince ourselves that it should be happening, or convince ourselves that this is like, the cliche in spirituality, it's perfect. Right? And all of that is a sidestep. It's a bypassing. It's the opposite. It's like to go from the negative to the positive. And we're just trading, it's a trade-off. And what's actually the cracking open that's happening, and what it's taking us to, isn't actually really being given an opportunity to be felt. There isn't full allowance, because we're just trading one idea or one thought for another. So this is important to get, because I spoke about going down into the belly. And even with spiritual, conditioning, we can have this idea that somehow we're going to come to a place of equanimity, or to be equanimous, or to be stable. But if it's here, if it hasn't penetrated, if it hasn't descended all the way down the fire of the heart through cracking us open, but descended all the way down to the belly, you still can be on this pendulum swing of negative and positive, where you're having your highs on this side and lows on this side, and they're just actually replacing each other. So that's a condition, you could say, of stability or of equanimity that is contingent on external forces. What's happening on the outside, or how much I can convince myself of something. How strong can the committee be in the mind? How strong or adequate is our strategies for the roles that we play? So there's still a lot of doing in that. There's a lot of efforting. There's a lot of role playing. There's a lot of work. So the cracking open has to allow ourselves to descend, so that these pockets, these residual pockets of emotional pain, remnants in these energy fields, are really allowed and given full space to be seen from this wide space of awareness that you are, from the totality of your presence, to be able to be seen just exactly as they are, just exactly, without any tint of adjusting, of changing, of covering, of somehow making it better, but to really be fully allowed and experienced here, right now, however it is felt in this moment, to let that feeling discharge itself.